Hello, hello. Good morning. Good morning if you're in Europe, and if you're not in Europe, then it's the middle of the night, so you're not going to be here. Probably. Um, I just tweeted about this stream, and it's gonna be going live. Some people will be wondering in here, maybe eventually soon, probably. Um, Today, I will be messing around with React Native text input components because I'm trying to make a rich text editor for React Native, a very simple what you see is what you get text editor. So I will try to make a text input component in React Native that allows you to make bold text, italic text, and links. That's the ultimate dream. I'm not sure how far I'm going to get on that journey this morning because I'm probably only going to be streaming for like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. Depends on when I meet up with my friend for lunch. But until then, let's jump into it. I'm not going to mess around with a really long intro. I'm just going to start messing around in the React Native code base here. So I've got a new, fresh React Native project. It's entirely empty. Doesn't even have like TypeScript yet. So I'm going to go open up in code. And rn text input is the name of our project because it's a sample code base, fresh code base, very fresh, just for us to play around with and learn about what it's like to use text inputs in React Native and some of the more advanced things that you can do with it. You can do some pretty powerful things with the built-in native text component with React Native, but a lot of times people use web views for React Native rich text input, and even for rich text input in native apps in general. People will use web views, and that's really gross because web views don't even have a very good rich text editing experience. It's basically all through something called content editable, which is a very fragile and complicated API. And what we'll mess around in React Native is also going to be kind of complicated and kind of fragile, but I think it'll be less of a problem for us. Or it'll be at least a different approach than the web view. It'll be more limited, but also it means we won't have to load up a full web view in our application, so it'll be a little bit more light than, for example, the web view that Notion uses in their rich text editing experience. And there's been a lot of discussion recently about Notion and React Native or web views or native technologies, and people get really, really sort of emotional about these things. And I try not to get emotional, but I also just try to get stuff done using the technology that I'm familiar with. So open up app.js to start working on your app. Okay, I'm actually just going to rename this right away to app.tsx. And we want to be using TypeScript. And it's like, it's got these squiggly lines. I don't know why we've got these squigglies. I might want to restart the server so that way, I'm just going to like quit Expo basically by doing Control-C, doing yarn iOS. And by the way, this was how I created the application with npx create expo app React Native text input. So it's pretty straightforward if you want to get to this point so far, and then you cd into the directory, and then you can do yarn iOS or yarn Android. And yeah, there are some additional steps to get the iPhone or Android simulator working. But I'm going to rerun yarn iOS, and Expo will probably be like, oh, hey, you're using TypeScript. Yeah. And do you want us to install TypeScript and everything? Yeah, I do. Thank you, Expo. And it's also going to create a TS config for us. So that's what it says. A TS config has been auto-generated. And now we're in a TypeScript project, not just a JavaScript project. And our squiggly lines went away because TypeScript is properly set up. Okay, so instead of having a text, like let's create a text input component. And we'll just put some note here that says try the text input. We can auto import the text input component from React Native. And we can give it a value, right? Foo. And on change text is, like a callback for what to do when the text has been changed. And I'm going to delete the status bar because we don't actually care much about the status bar. It says it was disconnected from Metro. I think it's because it was connected to the previous one. So here, I know it doesn't look like a text input, but you can see there's a cursor here. And I can't actually make any changes. When I do make a change, the change appears for a moment and then goes away. I don't know if you can see that because it's so fast. But when I make a letter, like I can momentarily see that letter before the controlled input steps in. This is not ideal. This is due to the fact that React Native by default has an asynchronous relationship between your application code and the native code, and you need to have a synchronous control if you want to be able to block a text input from happening. So what happens is the character gets added, and then because we've controlled this value to be always locked, then basically bad things are happening right now. But let's break this up into a little new component called function mediocre text. I don't expect this to be a rich text experience. I just want this to be like a mediocre text input experience. And we're going to return this component here. And we'll go ahead and make mediocre text jump in like this. Now, what if we have a special type basically for our text input content? That's not going to be a problem. So we can do type rich text or like text content. And for now, let's just say that it's a string, and we're going to change this to be something more interesting later. But what we can do is we can say that value and onValue are going to be the props for our new mediocre text component. And yeah, I'm not sure if this should be a controlled component or not. But for now, let's just go ahead and do what we hope will make sense, which is making it a controlled component. And in my other tab, I am going to quickly check on the stream health. Okay. I just want to make sure that I'm not dropping too many frames and whatnot. But yeah, shout out to anyone who shows up to the stream. Feel free to jump into chat. And it says excellent stream quality. So I think that means we can confidently push forward. I've never streamed from this place. I'm at my friend's place here in Copenhagen. Value of the input that's going to be given to the mediocre text is the text content. That's why we created this new type. And also onValue is going to be a callback, which is a text content. So we're going to have an input and a event for what happens when that input changes. And right now, we'll just feed this directly into the text input component. We're literally just going to wrap text input for the moment, just so that we can start to iterate on it. I think the text onChangeText is given like this, so we can do onValue. We can just call our prop with the new value. And I think TypeScript should be agreeing that this value is a string. So now, of course, we're not using our mediocre text input correctly. We need to keep the state somewhere. For now, we'll just keep the state in the app, even though probably you would have a different place to keep the state, a special place to manage the state. So const input state and set input state. We're just using simple React primitives here, so we'll use state. And the default, and we can also explicitly specify the type here, which is a text content. And that's just going to give us more valuable feedback in line if our default state does not match the expected state. So here we'll put the value as the input state, and the onValue will just set the input state. So we haven't done anything interesting yet, but we have created a quote-unquote mediocre text component. And what should work now is we should come in here and we should be able to edit it. Okay, great. So we're able to edit this. What's interesting is I don't think the cursor has jumped. So this O, how did my cursor wind up behind the O? I never did a back arrow that would imply that I should be moving this. So already there's like asynchronous issues with the way that React Native is handling this text input, which is a little bit scary. For the sake of understanding what's going on visually here, we need to have this text input needs to look like a text input, or look a little bit more visually distinguished. So I'll put a style on here, and I'll just use an inline style that says border width 1, border color. I don't want it to be like a black border, because that's the default. I'll just say that the border color is like CCC, which is a light gray. Okay, and we can see now that there is a border. I don't know if you can see that, it's very small. So let's also add a padding of like 8 and a border radius of like 8 maybe. Okay, that's interesting that the cursor appears very small for a moment there. I'm going to try refreshing the app. When I select it, okay, maybe that was just a temporary issue due to the hot loading nature of React Native. But yeah, this text input is like auto-growing, which is not exactly what we want. We want it to be big, so we can say align self stretch. I think that will tell it to take the full width available. And also, just for the sake of looking decent, let's put a margin on it. We wouldn't really want to have all these styles on the raw component, but just for the sake of looking at our project, we want this to not look too hideous. Now the thing is, if I hit enter, it blurs the component. And usually in like a sort of rich text environment, you want to be able to have multi-line text. So fortunately, the text input has a lot of props, a lot of valuable props. So we can say multi-line here. And now when I hit enter, it expands the text input. And this auto-expanding behavior is nice in some cases, but again, I just want this to be simple. We want to be able to focus on creating rich text with the bold and the maybe underline and doing links. There's just a few things that we want to have in order to make this like a real text editing experience that's a little bit more like when you're preparing text for humans, you want to be able to italicize something, or you want to be able to add a link in line. And that's really critical. I'm working on a content management system at the end of the day, and this is the bread and butter of a content management system. So I'm just going to set a hard-coded height for now, or actually I'll just set a min height. So it will expand once it gets beyond this minimum height, but I'll say the minimum height is like 120, and this will help. I'm going to reload so that way we can see what it's like with empty content. This is what it looks like now. And I think maybe we want to have a little bit more padding at the top. So I'll say padding vertical. I know I'm like procrastinating from getting to the interesting stuff. Okay, so this is looking pretty good as far as the bare text input component goes. And we've split it out into a separate component here called mediocre text. The value is still a string, but in order to present something that's not just a string, like this value that we pass into text input is always going to be a string. So how can we deal with that? Well, text input is actually a very special component because it has its own content editable style features. And that's content editable, by the way, is the name of the web API for when you are able to basically take a piece of HTML and say, hey, the user can edit this. And it's been a very sort of messy API in the world of web over the years. Not too much of a problem for us now because this is a totally separate mess from the web. But the good news, basically, the way it works in React Native is kind of similar to content editable. You're allowed to put children inside of the text input component. So here, we want to put a piece of text, and the text itself will be the value. So this is just normal React stuff in React Native a React Native text component. And at this point, it makes no sense to also be providing this value. I wonder if it's giving us troubles now. I'm just going to refresh this. Oh, wow. Yeah, interesting. Like, this is what happens when you do stuff that makes no sense. I'm going to type 1A in here, A, and 2 A's appear. So what's happening is React Native is saying, oh, you've specified this value, which is A, and you've also specified a child, which is A. So, like, what's going on? Basically, we're going to delete this, and then the problem will go away, and then we're going to probably have different problems. I'm going to reload just so we can get the fresh experience. Foo bar. Okay, so again, we have a very simple, not so rich text editing experience, but we do have the ability to change the style of this text component. And we can also do other things like, say, text style bold. Font weight is bold. Now we can say, now we have this interesting situation basically where our text input is rendering some hard-coded content, but this is going to be part of the change text experience. So I'll just put a console.log as well here so we can see exactly what text is coming out of our change text event. So this basically, you can see that the state previously was always bold, and now we're still able to select this. We're still in theory able to edit it. So I'm going to press the delete key, and what I expect will probably happen is this always text that I have selected. I can try and make it a little bit bigger for you, but the iPhone only gets so big. Let's hide the device bezels maybe. Oh gosh. Oh, I really wanted it to just look like a real simple window, but this is the simple window. So I'll delete always, and what happened, now it's really confusing because we're going to look here, and this was the resulting text after I had pressed delete. I had deleted the word always, so this bold that was part of the text is here. So on change text, by the way, is a simplified callback. We have other callbacks on, look at all these things. It's like I can't even list all of them. Some of them are just generic React Native touch interactions, but a lot of them are for the text input, like on end editing, on key press, like on layout is available basically for every React Native view, but then there's also on text input, on submit editing. But on text input is like the sort of main one. And it has basically the same value as on change text, but it's wrapped up in an event. So this is more of like the raw event. So there's e.native event dot, ooh, interesting things. So it's got text, but it also has the previous text, and it also has the range. Hello, 1200 noob. Welcome to the stream. We're screwing around with React Native text input stuff. And thanks for pulling up to chat and being a first-time chatter. So on value, basically, let's just move this logic here where we're logging out the behavior and running on value into on change text or on text input, because on change text is just here as a convenience. The good stuff is really all available through on text input. So you've got e.native event.value dot text, and this is the equivalent that we were getting through on change text. But here, what I'll do just for to make the next steps easier is I will destructure all of these values out of the native event, right? Oops. Come on, where's the, here we go. So we've got previous text, text, and range. Range will be interesting. So what is the type of range? It's an object. Can I reduce the quality to 360p? I see. Is the is there quality issues with the video? Because 360p probably will not be enough for you to see this text. So if I'm having trouble streaming, then that would be frustrating. I might need to scrap this entire stream because I'm just on Wi-Fi. It's a pretty fast Wi-Fi connection, so I had pretty good confidence in this working. And also, I'm not sure if I can edit the quality while I'm playing, but I will quickly take a look at the streaming settings. But yeah, I don't think I can change this settings because I'm attempting to stream at 1080p. So I hope this is working okay. But otherwise, I am recording this, so I will probably be able to post this no problem on YouTube. But thanks for the heads up about there being some video quality issues. I'm just going to sort of charge forward with this for a little bit because I don't know what else to do. So we're going to log the text, and we can do onValue with text, but it's going to get really interesting really soon. I am going to comment this out. This is more of an example just to show you that you're able to render different text elements inside of the text input, because this is where stuff is going to get really interesting. But yeah, I am afraid that my video quality is flaky, so very sorry if you're struggling through a low quality stream right now. Okay, so now again we have a working text input experience. This is working, it's just not very good because we still can't do things like adding bold or anything really. So one way that we can address that is we can say that, the first thing I think we should do is we should make it so that this text content is not just a simple string. It needs to be like an array of things. So we'll say it's an array, and it's an array of what? Well, it can still be an array of strings. And then maybe we can have a way of annotating that in addition to a string, you can also specify something that says this is a bold string, or this is a string that has a link. So I will go ahead and do that right now. Basically, the way that you can do that is you can say it's a union type between a string and a new type that we're going to create right now. We'll call it a rich string, because I don't know what else to call it. Type rich string. And maybe this can be a few different things, like let's say bold string. So I'm creating my own format here that's basically like a JSON format for rich text. Maybe I should be using a different format, but I'm doing something that's going to be convenient here for this project. And actually what we'll do maybe is I'll say, we'll just keep this really simple. So it'll be T, which is text, or sorry, a string, which is the actual text value. And then we can also have is bold, I'll just say bold, and that's a Boolean. And it's an optional Boolean because we don't necessarily want everything to be annotated this way. And we can also say, in addition to bold, let's just start with bold, okay? We're gonna keep it really simple. Like, it'd be really cool if by the end of the stream we had something where it's like, you can make some text bold inside of a React Native text input. I at least want to show that much because I don't know how much time I actually have here before I need to go off for lunch. So the rich string, we need to render this, and we need to use this new format of text content. The mediocre text props already refer to this, no problem. But here we've got a problem where we're doing onValue and we're not calling onValue properly because this is not the correct type. This is always going to be a string. So we need to do some computation here in this onTextInput callback. But what should be pretty straightforward is taking the value and rendering it properly, where we're going to render with bold when we want bold, and we're going to render with just a normal text when we want text. So here's what we'll do is we'll take the value and we'll do a map over it. So we know that every item in the thing is going to be a text content node, or I'll just say text for now. Text content. So then we'll say if the type of text content is a string, because we know that might be the case, then we're just going to return boring old text. Otherwise, we're going to want to do something a little bit more interesting. So at this point, we've already bailed out of our function, so now we know that we can just return a text that has a certain style. And basically, all we need to do is we need to check, and yeah, inside of the text element, we've got text content.t, which is the string value. And now here we can say font weight. Basically, the font weight will depend on whether or not text content.bold is here. If it's bold, then we will render bold. Otherwise, we render normal. You gotta love it. So this is just a ternary statement here. And we can delete this because now we are properly rendering stuff with bold. Now this callback here is never going to work. We do not have a working callback at the moment. And also this initial value is not right. So I'm going to jump in here and change the initial value so that way we can at least see if we're rendering things correctly. Say welcome, or like say hello world, and then we can have a new text node, which is like T of saying this is bold text. I'll put a space here because all of this stuff will just be concatenated. And I will also say bold is true. And then I'll say this, and then this is normal text. So now we can see our initial state is looking good. I know this is not super big, so I hope you're able to watch this in higher resolution. Maybe we can just bump this. Wait, I wonder if I can just do this. No, this is not good. I gotta tilt my head to make that work. In theory, the React Native app can be configured to automatically go into landscape mode, and that would be really nice. I wonder how tricky that is. There's something called the app.json. Orientation could be what? I guess there's no type hint on here, so I don't know what the valid orientation values are, but what if I just delete this? And now refresh maybe? I'm just hoping that we can get a bigger, yes, okay, good. So it's not looking super ideal here because we're not in a safe area view, so I'm just gonna waste a little bit more time and I'll do yarn add React Native safe area context. We'll do a real quick yarn installation. Sip my coffee. And we also want to start using the safe area context from our app. So you can do safe area. Yeah, we need to wait for this package to be installed before TypeScript starts giving us these hints. Looks like my one viewer got scared off, so I think the video quality might be not so robust, but not a problem because I'm going to post this on YouTube and I think more people will be able to enjoy it as like a VOD on my VODs channel. So now we can do a safe area context. Safe area provider provided by the correct library here. And now our layout should be a little bit respectable as long as we do a safe area view here. And this will keep the text input outside of the naughty zone. Because currently, before I hit save, the text input is like inside of the status bar here, inside of the notch. And now, I hope, I need to restart the Metro server, of course. Just by running yarn iOS, it should do what it needs to do. And I'll just hit like reload. And I'm hoping that the presentation will be a little bit better here. So the safe area view doesn't necessarily maximize the width like we were doing, which is why it looks a little bit different this align self stretch kind of needs to be, I'm going to leave it, yeah, I'm just going to add that to this style. Okay, finally we have something that's kind of a respectable looking layout so that hopefully you can see what's going on a little bit better. But I can't edit this, by the way. All right, it's letting me edit it, but it should not be letting me edit it because it's a controlled input. So that's a little bit confusing to me because we're not ever calling this on value. What I'll do is I'll add some statement here. So that way we can see from the log statement how safe area view, or how mediocre text, our new component, is responding. And we can say, we just want to annotate it so that way in our logs we're able to see when the text input component actually responds. I'll hit reload. Okay, come on. Maybe the reload gets messed up. So it's kind of interesting that it's allowing me to edit this because I would expect that this is a controlled component. We're telling the text input what to render at any given time. So this is a little bit strange. I'm not quite sure what to make of this. Because there's no prop or anything that says that you're going to be able to control this thing. There's also clear text on focus. That's interesting. There's all sorts of like powerful props on the text input component, or very interesting props. Whether or not they're powerful is much more of a subjective statement. But what we should do is we should be saying, like, here's the raw text event, and we'll say that there's the text, the previous text, and the range. We'll just put all of it in here. Previous text, and then we'll say the start, which is the range.start, and then the end, which is the range.end. So now we can see basically everything that the text input element is giving us when we change something. So now I hit the A key, and it says, hey, this is what you've changed. The previous text was this whole thing, and the new text is just A. I expected that this new text would be basically the whole string. Isn't that interesting? This is normal A. So I'm going to type now B. So maybe it's, yeah, and there was an autocorrect event that just happened. So I know that might have been really confusing to see because it was basically, it said AB and now it says AN because it's assumed that I've flubbed the key and I meant to say an. So it autocorrected to an, and then it tells us, look, that it changed these characters. It changed the character from the start to the end. This was the previous text, and the previous text did have the full string included, but the new text only shows the difference. So what we want to do is we want to take these raw text events and figure out what's actually going on, apply that change to our original text content that's being passed in, and call on value with this new thing. So what we can do, basically we need to write like a bunch of like logic at this point that's going to interpret what's going on. And that's kind of interesting and kind of fun. The other thing is that we want to have a button, basically. We need to add a button that says, make this text bold. So that's where it gets really kind of tricky and confusing, and there's like different strategies that we could take. For this sort of simplified approach, what I will do is I will go ahead and put that all inside of our mediocre text component because that's kind of where it would make sense to go. And also there's like styling already on this component. So we can maybe figure out how to fit that into the aesthetic of this box, of this component. So maybe, for example, like there's different corner for border radiuses. Border radius, top, start, and right. Border radius, bottom, end, and right, and left and right. So yeah, start and end refers to like the layout, the direction of the layout. But for now, let's just basically say that the bottom right is 0. I'm doing this for aesthetic reasons, by the way. Obviously, it's a border radius. Bottom left radius, they're going to be 0 because we're going to render basically the controls, like the bold button, at the bottom of the screen. Okay, we've gone and made these hard angles here. So now we can go ahead and render a view, still in the safe area view, but under the text input. And again, we're going to put an inline style just for the sake of simplicity. So we'll say border width, or we can specify border width differently for the different sides of it. So for example, we can set border width at 1, and then we can say border top width is 0 because we want to render border on the sides and not on the top. But there is some layout issues. One problem is that the margin has been placed on the text input component itself. So I'm going to remove the margin because that's going to allow the extra view to show up here. And I'll say that there's going to be like a height here. We can just hard code the height to be maybe 30 pixels for now. And maybe a background color just so that we can kind of see what's going on. And the background color will be a light gray, I think, like an E. Okay, and there's a border at the top. There's a border on the other sides, but I want this border to match the aesthetic of the other border. So, no problem. Border bottom right radius is going to be 8. These are just hard-coded for now. Border bottom left radius is also 8, and then the border color, I just remember, is CCC. Okay, so now we have this little like doc section that's going to help us form our rich text input. And we want to have like a button inside of here. And I don't want to spend too much time on the aesthetic of the buttons and the formatting of everything. So I just spent too much time doing that just now. So I will just use the default button component inside of React Native. It has this very special place in my heart. You can specify the title as like bold. So now we have this, it's so ugly. It really does make me want to change it. One thing I'll do is I'll say that this height here is the min height. So that way the button should at least fit. It doesn't actually fit very well. Okay. So sometimes when there's a layout issue that I don't expect, I just refresh the simulator or I refresh the app because sometimes the hot loading affects the layout in weird ways. Also, it's saying that each child in a list should have a unique key prop. And that's really good feedback. In fact, it's a problem with our actual schema because we don't have a way to identify which string is which. So I will go ahead and change our formatting rules here. So I will say that you need to add a key, which is a string. And this is going to come in useful not just for React when it's doing its own comparisons of the child components, the text components that we're giving it. It'll also come in handy probably in our own implementation. So this means I've changed the format again. We don't need this line of code where we are handling a raw string because raw strings are no longer allowed. And we now know that every text content is going to have a key. So we can specify the key here, and this will get rid of that warning that we were seeing in React, where, let me just show you the warning once again. Every child in the list should have a unique key prop. So text content.key. And then it's kind of up to us to make sure that there's always a key that's specified. So key, it doesn't really matter what it is as long as it's unique in the list. And we're going to change this as well. Key is A, text is hello world. And we need to do that over here as well. Key is C, text is whatever the text is. Okay, so now we've at least fixed those immediate issues, and the bold button is in a place where we will have access to this sort of thing. But one problem is that we don't necessarily know what text to bold. So we can do the onPress, and we have a handler here. And we basically want to do a callback where we call the new value, but we're affecting the boldness of whatever has been selected. But we don't know what's been selected. So I think there's a callback on selection change. So we need to keep in our component state, like, what is the current selection? So e.native event is going to be where all the good stuff is. So there's .selection and then .target. So the target is probably actually a React element. I'm guessing. I'm not sure. Let's see what is on the selection. There's selection.end and selection.start. So this is basically just indexes in the entire string, or in the entire like rich text area. So now we're just going to like show this for the sake of clarity. When we do a selection, we get this select callback. So by the way, the way I selected that piece of text is I double tapped it. On the first tap, I placed the cursor here on position 31, and then when I double tapped, the cursor basically jumped to be a selection. So selection refers to both cursor location and the actual highlighting, selection that you might be familiar with. So we want to make it so that if you like double tap this and then press bold, it turns the bold off. And if you select this and you press bold, it turns the selection on. Now I need to like write a bunch of code now that does that. So this is where we get into the actual logic for how a React Native text input component really works, really can work under the scenes without using a web view. Because again, web views are how rich text is often done in React Native, but it does not need to be done this way. There are the native APIs available to do it through raw React Native, and that's what we're kind of experimenting with today. Until I get bored and get stumped and get hungry and decide to go to lunch. So not a problem. I will go ahead and say, all right, maybe let's meet at 1. Okay. So on selection change, let's just go ahead and save the selection into our state, because the selection is a start and an end. So we will have some local state here inside of our mediocre text component. Selection and set selection. And that's going to be a use state. And actually, wait a second. So like, what is the type of this state? It's either null, because there might be like no selection. In fact, I don't know if we get a callback when, yeah, so there's always a selection state once, like if you're focused. So maybe we also want to keep track of whether or not we're focused, because what happens if you press the bold button and the entire text input is like not even focused? In fact, because my keyboard is plugged in, quote unquote plugged in, like it's just a simulator keyboard, like I don't even have the ability to unfocus this element. So maybe just for the sake of sanity, what I will do is I will render 2 of these mediocre text components. 2 of our new components, we'll try dropping them in. And this one just will always be empty, but it will be there. Oops, but what did I do wrong? On value is missing. Okay, well, on value is kind of a formality. So I'll say that that's an optional field. And then I think I also have a syntax error. Otherwise, the formatting would have worked. I see, I'll delete that. Okay, now we've got 2 rich text inputs, and now we can focus between them. So like, I don't know what would happen now if I press bold up here in this one. Obviously nothing, because our bold button implementation is a big stack of nothingness. But that can be fixed as long as we know the selection state. So let's go ahead and save the selection state. And the type of the selection state can be null if our component is blurred, or it can be something with a start, which is a number, and an end. which is also a number. And by default, let's say null, because we don't really know what our selection state is from our initial state. But now we'll have the set selection, or now we can use set selection on the selection callback, set selection, and we can literally just pass in e.nativeEvent.selection, and TypeScript will agree with us that's a good idea. And also, just for the sake of completeness, I will do onBlur, where we will just say that, hey, when our component has been blurred, we want to set selection to null, because you really don't have anything selected at this time. Okay, now we're in for some good times, right? Because now the bold, when you press bold, you have access to everything you need. So let me just show what that's like before we write our obnoxiously verbose algorithm. Say, doing bold or unboldening. And we'll specify that we have the selection, which is literally just selection. We also have the value, which is the current state of our rich text. So I will double click normal, and we have the callback. We can see, oh, this is old callback. Old stuff here, because I deleted the selection callback. But now if I tap bold, it says, okay, this is the selection. You've selected from character 41 to 47, and this is what you had as your state before. So now we need to write an algorithm that figures out, like, okay, how to change this into toggling bold for the section that we have selected, which is like, this is going to take a while just to write this snippet of code. So, like, sorry. Sorry, we have to write actual code right now. I know it's been so fun and simple up until this point. But what I will do is I will say const new value. We're just going to copy value. This is not going to be a highly performant algorithm right now. I'm just hoping that hopefully we can get something working. And at the end, we're going to return the new value. Wait, no, we're not going to return the new value. We're going to call on value with the new value. So hopefully we can figure this out. For the sake of testing purposes, I will simplify our initial state. So what we're going to need to do basically is we're going to need to figure out which of the items in this array refer to this selection. This algorithm is going to take like some amount of brain power for me to accomplish. So it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. So we're going to have like we need to figure out which of these things we want to influence. So maybe in our initial case, in our initial case, we only have, like, we're starting off with a string that has no styling. And we're going to want to basically be taking this one key A, and make it so that there's more items in this thing. We're going to want to go from this state to the state where there's hello as one thing and then world as another thing that has the bold flag on it, which is what we see here. So we're basically going to need to decide whether or not we need to do a split. But maybe we're going to do a split by default. So we're going to basically need to walk through our value, which is our new value or our original value, because this is an array. Value is an array. So maybe what I will do is I will start by taking the value const, and basically we need to figure out what are the positions in the array, the different numbers of the locations of the text. This whole process, by the way, is so painful. I feel sorry for you having to watch this. I feel sorry for myself having to present this and figure this out, because this is something that I would really love for there to be a good library for. But I have looked around, and all of the sort of rich text editing libraries I've seen were built on web views, which is a little bit of a disappointment. So let's get into the fun shit, right? So we're going to say that we're going to say positions is a value.map. And we're going to say for each of these values, we're going to want to grab inside of that value the t, which is the actual text value, and we're going to return the t.length, right? Oh, I missed a character here. That's why TypeScript got confused. So positions is an array of numbers where for each number, it corresponds to the length of the previous value. So now we have selection. So first of all, I think what we should do is we should bail out of a few confusing cases for now, because we need to keep this simple enough that we can actually understand the logic, understand the implementation. Like, we're deep in this crap right now. But you can see here just from the context that we're in, we're working on what it's like to toggle the bold behavior of our new hacky little text input. So we're going to be comparing the selection start and end with the positions in order to figure out which which text item we are going to affect. So like, I think this is going to be very buggy by default, and we want to just avoid certain situations right now. Like, for example, if selection.start equals selection.end, let's just say we will return. Basically, we want to bail out of this case. We could throw an error, but for the sake of just being not entirely broken to the user, saying empty selection not supported yet. So like, I'm just struggling to wrap my mind around this program, about this little algorithm that I'm trying to write here. So we're just bailing out of confusing situations in a way that will be not super busted to the user, hopefully. And I'm also going to pass in this positions array to our log statement so we can understand what's going on. So now if I tap this and I hit bold, it'll say, oh, yeah, sorry, you're trying to do something that like the software developer is not smart enough for right now, because that would be kind of a weird state. Wouldn't be the end of the world, but let's focus on this case first, where we're just trying to make the first word bold. So I just press the button. So we should get a log statement saying doing boldening or unboldening. And I think the first trick will be to basically try to get, and what this positions thing is saying is it's saying, oh, there's only one item in the array, or only one node of text content, and that node is 13 characters long. So what we need to do is we need to say which node are we affecting. So we'll say let key of toggle node is null, but it could be a number, a string, or null. And what we'll do is we'll say that basically we need to determine which node to toggle. But the thing is, we might need to split this up, and that's exactly what we're doing here, because we've got two strings that need to be broken up, because we're going to only want to have one of them be a bold node, because we're only selecting the first word to bold it, to boldify. Not a problem. So when we're doing this key of toggle node, by the time we get down to this like next step, like do bolding, so first we're going to need to basically prepare the value, the new value for, and maybe actually we need to specify that these are keys of the toggle node, because you might be toggling on several different things. And yeah, this is, again, it's just the code for making something bold, but I think it would be really awesome if we got this working. So we're going to prepare the new value to have, oh, by the way, if this is keys, then this is an array of strings, or it's null. I don't know. The reason it could be null is because we're still going to be figuring this out as we go about this process. Prepare the new value to have appropriate slicing. Hello, Coriad360. So when you split, do you create a new node in the state immediately after the previous one and then remove the normal text from the old node? Yeah, I think basically the way that the general algorithm will work is I will start by adding the splits that are necessary so that way you will have like whole nodes that you can toggle with. And then you need to decide, are you bolding or unbolding? And then we need to apply the new bold values to the keys of toggle node. It's really applying the new value in an abstract sense. We're applying the new value to the new value that are indexed by this. Yeah, so I don't know if I answered your question. I will quickly show, if I can, show you what your question was. Oh, no, I'm having connectivity issues, so I can't even show your original question. But you asked, when you split, do you create a new node in the state immediately after the previous one and then remove the normal text from the old node? For select on multiple words, you toggle the bold on multiple nodes. Yeah, that's what's confusing because you can select, potentially in this selection, you can select as many nodes as you want. You're selecting basically a range of nodes and even maybe a subset within those ranges. So the first thing we need to do is if you're selecting a subset within these ranges, and that's what we're doing here because the initial state, the initial state is just this, where it says hello world, but we're going to need to splice this into two different nodes because one of them is going to be bold, the other one won't be. Oh, I'm showing you something that you can't see, of course. Typical. Okay, so yeah, this initial node will need to be split into two nodes before we can even worry about toggling the bold of that node. I don't know how good of a job I'm doing of explaining that, but we'll see. At least these comments are like here to here to help me understand my own code and what's going on. For a select on multiple words, yeah, you just toggle the bold on multiple nodes. It totally is going to depend. There's all these edge cases. Okay, good. I'm glad I'm able to explain this with some level of articulation. At least someone gets it. So first, let's start by like prepare the new value to have the appropriate slicing. This is where it's going to get really. This is probably one of the scarier steps. And also we need to identify, maybe this is the next step, or maybe this is going to be part of this step. We need to identify the keys of toggle node. And then basically we're going to decide by looking at the nodes that are already there, whether or not they're already bold. If they are already bold, then we will untoggle. We will say, oh, we are unbolding. So we will say let is bolding is true. Maybe as the default is yes, you will be going to bold, but also it should be basically be using the heuristic of looking at whether or not the thing is already bold to undo that. So prepare the new value to have the appropriate slicing. So it's possible that the appropriate slicing is already there. So in the case where you've selected the entire string, we don't need to, yeah, it's a triple tap on iOS to select the whole thing. If I tap bold in this case, we should be able to identify this case. So maybe we should focus on this, the very simplest thing where you're unbolding and bolding the whole thing. Let's make it work for this first, and then we will see a lot of gross edge cases appear. But here we can go. You can see that doing boldening or unboldening, we know that there's an item with 13 item lengths, like this, our string is 13 characters long. And here's the selection. The selection matches basically this thing. So we need to figure out that, like, the idea here is that once we're done, the keys of toggle node will just be an array that has A in it. So at some point we're going to say keys of toggle node dot push basically. Oh wait, it's not necessarily an array yet. So we'll say that it's an array, and the array has all of the nodes that are selected. And in this case, we're going to skip this step entirely because we know that we are already good on the slicing. But we might need to detect that case as well. So we're going to have different variables basically for like identifying the start of the string and identifying the end of it. So this is where it gets really super confusing. We're going to basically be walking through our values, but we can use shortcuts because of the positions, where we've basically identified the length of each of these things. Man, this is like some of the most confusing code that I've had to write in a little while. Like, this is an actual algorithm, basically. Not going to be a very pretty algorithm or a very complicated algorithm, but this is what it's all about. This is hardcore computer stuff. And I just typed const out of like autopilot. Yeah, like maybe like I need to turn on GitHub Copilot and see what sort of code it will write for me, because it actually should have all the context available here. But I wouldn't understand the code that it wrote, and I do kind of want to have an understanding of what's going on here for everyone's benefit. So let's say that let's have something called let consideration node. And we're going to start with 0. So what we'll do is we'll say, and the other thing the other edge case that I want to sort of catch is if new value dot length is 0, then we have an invalid state basically because there's no nodes, and it doesn't really make any sense. Empty value is not supported yet. This is probably going to be caught actually by this first situation, but now we have confidence that at least the new value or the value dot 0 is there. So, and we're just going to be using new value and modifying it. So that's yeah. So you imagine having a map of all character indices to a Boolean bold value. It's tricky because that would make sense in its own way. When you're basically saying like there's going to be a array of Booleans, and each Boolean is whether or not a certain character is bold. But it ties back into the format that the data is being saved in. And this is the format that I think makes the most sense for saving the data. And also this is really easy to present, because earlier in the stream, we wrote this code where we're basically mapping over the different values of our text nodes. And for each node, it's really simple. You just render the key that identifies it, and you specify whether or not it's bold. You render it as bold, and then you just render this text string inside of the text element, and all of this is within the actual text input component. So that's kind of interesting. So the consideration node, let's say, look, this is going to actually be the consideration node index, and let consideration node is going to be the new value. It should be the new value because the new value at this point will have the quote-unquote appropriate slicing, but we're skipping that step for now. So consideration node index. So now we can specify basically like we're going to be probably iterating over the different nodes. And because the first consideration node is the first one, we're probably, at some point we're going to have like a for loop or a while loop where we're going to basically be finding which node is the appropriate node to modify. And all this code is going to need to get rewritten later. I'm guessing that this logic will change once we've done the appropriate slicing, but that part is just a little bit tricky for me to wrap my mind around right now, and I don't really know if this is where I should be starting, even though it's definitely the first step of this algorithm. But what I will say is that if, okay, so we're going to say consideration selection offset. Let's say let selection offset. We're going to have this basically be, well, this is just the selection.start. But we're also, this is going to need to change over time. So like there's going to be a loop here. Like I don't really know how this loop will work, but I'm just going to kind of put these comments in here to kind of give me a hint that this is what we're going to be doing several times as we move forward, looking for the correct nodes that we want to turn bold. So we're going to want to take a look at the consideration node dot length, but in order to know the consideration node length, we already have looked at the dot length. It's not actually expensive though to just do t dot length. If this equals basically the end value, right? Because at this point, selection.end, again, back to our example data, selection.end is 13, and our node length for the 0 node is this. So we're going to see if it matches. And we also need to check if our start matches as well. We're going to just do the simplest possible case when you've selected an entire node that already exists. So it's going to be because this is if the end matches, if selection.end matches the length of the string. And then we'll also say that if the selection offset, which just starts at 0, because we're kind of starting at the 0 thing, if the selection offset equals selection.start, I'm going to say and. So now we'll say console.log, you have selected node, and now we know this should be consideration node dot key, because this is how we've labeled every node. So I'm going to say we've got a new thing. I'd really like to clear this. C. I guess C does clear. Wow, thank you, Expo. You learn something new all the time. So in the Expo client, I just pressed C, and it cleared all the previous statements. Okay, so now I'm going to I literally can do Command A, and I'm going to tap bold. And it did not look like, oh, it did work. You have selected node A. That's really nice. So what I will do is I will say keys of toggle node dot push A. Or sorry, not A, consideration node dot key. I'm glad you're finding this key cool, Coriad 360, because this is this is painful code to write. But basically now this is what we've been doing, where we've been identifying the keys of toggle node. It looks like we've gotten ahead of ourselves there. Yeah, exactly. So, and that's why this is in a loop, because potentially we could be toggling several nodes. Oh boy. So at this point now we know, so we'll say const first toggle node is going to be, this is part of this logic of are we bolding or unbolding? And then I will say like that this is the identify, this is the comment that I just deleted, identify keys of toggle node. And I'll say that this is like a to do. Okay, so are we bolding or unbolding? Well, we're basically just going to say, we're going to look at the first node that we have selected. Of course, in this case, we've only done this push once. So there will only be one keys of toggle node, but we'll look at the first key of the toggle node. And because that's a key, we will basically be looking at our nodes. So new value dot find. So we're going to find one of our nodes where the node dot key is equal to the key that we're looking for. Again, we're not even worrying about making this algorithm fast. Like, yes, we're going to have to iterate over our code here, but this might not even be a real bottleneck at the end of the day, because this is only happening when you press the actual bold button. This logic is not happening on every keystroke, but we will have to deal with logic happening on every keystroke as well later on. So the first toggle node is going to be basically useful for identifying if we are bolding or not. So first toggle node, it's going to have, it could be also null, but so I'm going to annotate that, I mean, it shouldn't be null at this point. It would be very unexpected if this were null, but I will go ahead and say that bold, so this is a Boolean. So we literally just want to toggle. This is how the toggling is done. We're looking at whether or not this node that you have selected is currently bold. If it's not bold, we're inverting that, I think. So now we're going to do this step, which is pretty straightforward. So we're going to say new value. Is new value a const or a, yeah, whatever. So what we'll do is we'll do new value dot, okay, wait, so for each of the keys of toggle node, dot for each key, or toggle key, toggle node key. We want to be pretty explicit in our naming because that makes it so much easier to understand our code afterwards. We're going to want to go into our new value, and it's not an index. Maybe we should do indexes of toggle. Whatever. I'll just say new value dot find. Yeah, we need to do find index. And dot key equals toggle node key. It's the toggle value index. So then we will say that the toggle value index, so new value dot toggle, new value, look up the toggle value index, and we are going to reassign this because it's a new object. But we're literally also just modifying this thing. So we're going to spread in the previous thing, and we're going to set bold to be is bolding. And so now basically we will be applying bold true or bold false to each of our nodes, I think. And then we're going to call on value a new value. So maybe this is working code. I'm going to try it. I'm going to tap bold. Null is not an object. Evaluating keys of toggle node. I see. So I'm assuming basically that it's, okay, well, because now that it's an array, there's no reason to have the null ability, because you can just have an empty array, which is a great default value. Okay, so now we're going to select all here. Select all, and then tap bold. It got bold! Victory! Okay, so now even if we don't get anything else done in the entire stream, at least we've done this much. And what's interesting is I'm still able to type here, but I didn't write the code that should make this text input possible. So what's bad about that is then if we like have some save button somewhere, that like this extra code that I've written, like good shit will not show up in our, like we're getting these raw text events that this value is being changed, that it's good shit is happening, but we're not actually getting the raw value that we should. For example, where's the good stuff? Here. This is the actual working, the evidence of it actually working. This is the callback that the app receives after we pressed bold. where it did get the new value and it knows that, hey, this string has gotten to be bold. I'm just glad that we got to have like a win, because when you're like starting off on a new algorithm, like it can be really frustrating until you see it work at all. And now it's just going to be easier, like mentally and emotionally, than to do anything else, than to sort of suffer through a bunch of code that doesn't even work at all. Now we'll be able to make sure that we don't make regressions to this existing behavior while we add new behavior. But we do have this bug already where we're not able to handle these text inputs. We've got these raw text events, and we need to flow that back through our application. So I'm going to take a break on the bold button, and now we're going to go into the callback for what happens when typing happens. On text input, you can see that we're doing a console.log, but we're not actually doing any logic. And what we want to do is we want to do on value here with the new value. The new value doesn't exist. And I wish this was going to be an easy thing to do, but it's going to be another one of these obnoxious algorithms where we need to decide how to affect this. So what we're going to be doing probably is creating modifying the existing text inputs, or modifying the existing nodes, rather than doing anything else to those nodes. Because here, we maybe in the bold button logic, we have to maybe potentially split the nodes up, but we won't have to do any splitting of the nodes, I don't think, when you're just inputting text. And what I will do is I will have some similar logic. Basically, let's say const new value. It's just going to mimic, it's just going to be a copy of the array of the old value, which is, again, this isn't the most performant way to do things, but like this will mean that we're using immutability properly inside of this component for now. We might want to use, we might want to use mutations eventually, so that way we can be a little bit less wasteful on the JavaScript performance side. But for now, we need to understand what's going on as clearly as possible. So we've got this new value, which is spreading the previous value. And we're going to specify like let node to edit is, say, 0 by default. It's going to be one of these, it's probably just going to be an index of the node that we want to edit. We could also use the key, but at this point, the index is going to be perfectly stable. So now we need to find which node we want to edit, and I'm just going to skip this step. Because right now we're still just in the very simple case where we're just having a single text node, and we want to be able to turn it bold, turn it unbold. And we'll get to the more interesting stuff probably never. But maybe we'll see the really weird, juicy parts later. But we really have to make it so that when we change the text, it flows properly back through our controlled component. So let's say that the new value, say const node is equal to the new value dot, it's the node to edit. So we're always going to be grabbing the first node for now. So, and we don't really want to mutate the node either. We're going to want to go and affect the identity of it. So we'll say new value node to edit is going to be something. It's going to extend the behavior of node, because maybe there's formatting flags that are on there, and there's probably a key on there. And the other thing we want to do quickly, I'm just going to copy this, because we don't really even support this very simple case where there's no text in the text input. By default, there's text in the text input, and we're just going to make sure that's the case, because otherwise this node won't be here. And that would be a problem. That would be very confusing. So basically we're going to edit the text. Like, ugh. So now maybe we'll have a functioning thing as long as you type ugh. So now I'm going to type a letter. I'm going to type A. And what I was hoping would happen is, yeah, this value is happening. But like, this is no longer being a controlled text input. I might need to go do some like Stack Overflow or like React Native text input controlled with children. Because there's text input as we normally use it, where we pass it text. But today, we're using text input and we're rendering children inside of it. So let's just see what the React Native docs has to say. Okay, there's set native props. Yeah, we knew about this. I wonder if text input documentation describes this situation, because maybe this is kind of understood and I just had forgotten about it. Let's see. Wonder controlled. Default value. Okay, well, but you are using a controlled component. Okay, so you can set editable false. Okay, what about children? We should be talking about children. Important for autofill. Oh, this is an Android only flag. Okay, so we just need to find more information about React Native text input with children. Because this is kind of a rare thing that's done. I think a lot of people don't even know that you can have children of a text input. Like, it's something that I've forgotten from time to time. But it's a little bit frustrating that it's no longer working as a controlled component. Because what should have happened, and what I'll do as a sanity check, is we should be rendering again. We should be back inside of this code where we are rendering out all the different text nodes. So I will say like value.map. So yeah, like we should be saying like console.log render mediocre text. And just for the sake of clarity, we'll say value.map v to the v.t, which is the text of every node, and we're going to just join them with an empty string. So that way we're just going to get one string. Do I have an extra parenthesis here? Okay. So now I want to make it so that, okay, render mediocre text ugh, and then another call to render mediocre text. What's going on here? Oh, that's because there's this bottom mediocre text. So I don't like that there's this bottom mediocre text anymore. Maybe I'll just comment this out and put in a text input. Select me to blur. Okay, this is a little bit confusing, but basically like there's a text input here and I don't want them to get mixed up. So, okay. I'm going to type A. So what should be rendered is this ugh, because that's what we're doing, is we're setting this as the value ugh. And let me just clear, and I'm going to refresh. Okay, so it rendered twice with our initial string. And that's passed in, so it's here is where we're calling that render mediocre text. And maybe I'll just try doing a deletion. Like I will delete the exclamation mark. And now it, for some reason, it's being rendered twice, like everything is being double rendered. Not quite sure why that's happening, but it should have jumped to say ugh on the screen. It's like the React Native rich text is not like acting like a controlled component. Because at this time here, we're mapping over the value, so it should literally just say ugh. We've confirmed that this rendering has happened, but it still is showing the sort of default text. So how do we make it so that there's like, well, I didn't expect that to work anyways. Tap, toggle, bold. It works in that case. So that's a case where the controlled input is changing, and it's actually being respected. That's kind of strange. So anyways, what we should be doing here is we should be looking at the range.start and the range.end. But it's so confusing that this on value is not resulting in the expected behavior. So if everything is going properly, we won't actually have any troubles here. But if there are any bugs, then basically the user won't be able to see the actual result of the text that they create. So here's one thing that I can try that I'm going to really not like, but just so that we can kind of understand what's going on, like we kind of have to run experiments. And one experiment that we can do is force our whole component to unmount and remount. And there's a trick in React, React Native as well, of course, but in React, you can use the key to force a component to remount. So here we can say basically that the key of the mediocre text is something. And then when we do something else, you maybe press some extra button out here. Title is remount. Then we're going to handle this button and we will force this mediocre text component to remount. And this is basically going to be like a way to probably, hopefully, force the text input to resemble the exact value that we have here in our application state, where we're actually saving the state of the rich text. So this is where I'm going to do const hacky regret key. Okay, and that's going to be a use state. And I'll just specify this as a number because keys can be numbers, no big deal. Hacky regret key. And when you press this button, let's do set hacky regret key. And you want to increment it, so you'll say k's. It's a callback function for this thing where you do k equals k plus 1. K equals 1 plus equals 1. I think. So hello world, and you type something like A, and this shows up as A. It looks like it's working, but what it should actually have jumped to is it should say ugh, because that's this temporary code that I put in there just to show that this is not working. So now if I tap remount, I think it'll say ugh. Yeah. So what it did is it unmounted the whole text input tree and mounted it back again. And this makes me super uncomfortable. This whole thing makes me super uncomfortable. So what we can maybe do is we can maybe assign a new key. So I'm going to create a helper function at the top. Get key. And we'll say let, we'll call it node key just because it's a little bit more explicit. And we'll say let node key count index, I don't know, just node key count ID or something equals, and here's a silly trick that you can use, is you can use, to create a unique key, you can create an increment here, and then we would basically return node key count ID, and then you would also increment node key count ID. But the problem here is that that means over several different refreshes, like when you reload and get new data, then this will always be 0. And so then you're always going to be using 0, 1, 2, 3. You're always going to have a lot of these duplicated IDs. So here's the trick, the hack, the gross thing, is you can specify basically the time. So we'll say const time ID. So this will ensure basically that all of our keys are unique. This is really kind of a gross hack, but it's very effective. This is a way that you can always be sure. Now if you call getNodeKey several times quickly, no big deal because you've incremented this key count. And if you refresh, you always know that you're going to have a, with pretty much certainty, unless two people refresh at the exact same millisecond, which is never really going to happen, you've got this time ID. So now we could use getNodeKey to specify a new key. And here, let's do that here on the node that we're modifying. And I'm thinking that this is going to hint to React Native that, like, look, you need to unmount the thing that you previously had, that maybe text changes are going on, and then you need to mount this new thing. So now we will refresh our app and do this little rotate thing, because I don't know if it's Expo or React Native, but like you needed to rotate it to tell it that you've got the horizontal layout. So now I will type a letter. I will type the letter A, and without having to press this stupid remount button, I will type the letter A and I expect it to say ugh. Okay? No, not good. Not good at all. But let's also verify that this is doing what we expect it to do. Yeah, where the new value is ugh, and it has a distinct key. Whereas the previous state has the, well, it's not rendering the state. Yeah, so that's really bad news. Bad news, because now when I press remount, for example, the input does reflect the correct state. So this is horrific. But also, like, I feel like the only way forward is to go forward, if that makes any sense at all, and basically pretend like I haven't seen this problem, which I think is a pretty big problem. And yeah, we can just go ahead and continue on this logic where we are just making sure that as the user is typing in here, that this value flows through to say new value. Because right now we've just hard-coded this ugh situation, but it means that we won't be able to look at the app to see if it's working. We're going to be having to look at the log statements to see if the correct thing is going on. Not super fun, but it's potentially still workable. Potentially. Well, maybe this will be a showstopper, maybe it won't. So we need to basically be modifying the node.text, because this is basically going to mean that every time there's a key press, we are not changing the node, we're just copying it over. We need to be using the text from the text input event, and also be looking at the range to make sure that we're affecting it properly. So just to be naive, I'll show what it's like when we use text. We use this simple case, and it's no longer going to say ugh. So in order to test it, we can use the remount button, but I will reload just for sanity's sake. Okay, now I will type A. Okay, and so what it's done is it's seen that basically this new text event is A. So it did not give us a callback that included the previous text. So what that means is that it's starting to modify at character 13. And it's the end of the modification is also at character 13, so I guess that means that the text is what's showing up between it. I'm going to do a few more experiments just so that I can understand that a little bit better. So if I select the whole thing and type foo, yeah, so yeah, when I typed F, yeah, so that when I typed the first F, this was the callback that happened. It knew that, hey, there was this previous text that's being modified, and we need to do all of this logic to determine basically what is the new state. Pretty scary, pretty unpleasant. Because we need to not just identify which node this is in this array, but we need to figure out what part of the string is being modified here. So at the end of typing foo, this value should just say foo, like it shows up here in the text input. But now our value is out of date. So if the user were to leave and then come back, it would look like this. Not ideal. Not ideal at all. Okay, so I typed A. And again, it's like given me the previous selection state and the text that's being, oh, I see. So it's saying we're modifying from this range to this range. And because there's, and previous text, I think, includes the entire text string. So we might not even need previous text. For the sake of simplicity, I'll just comment it out, because we kind of can figure that out our own way. So what we want to do is we want to basically be modifying the t.text. So let new text equals t.text, and we will be doing some modification on it. New text is going to be what we're outputting. Node.t. I got that a little bit mixed up. So new text, now we can reassign it and say that it's new text, or we'll just say node.t.substring, I think is the, so the substring specifies start and end, but no, actually that doesn't let you inject text. So d.text.slice, maybe? Yeah, so what does slice give you? It says start and what's the string method that allows you to insert into a string? It allows you to like inject a string. Oh gosh. This recommendation, like at the top of Google here, is saying, oh, use slice and then just like concatenate the slices. It's possible. Oh yeah, that seems to be that there's no way. You can use substring. Yeah, so you kind of have to implement your own insert function. Is that's what Stack Overflow is saying. So I will go ahead and do this like slicey thing where you kind of slice this stuff that's at the beginning of the string, and then you slice, and then you put in this new text that you're inserting, which is being typed, and then you slice after the string. So let's see how well this works. So the new text is going to go from the beginning of the string to, and by the way, this is only working if you have a single node, a single text node, but that's all we have to deal with for now. Range.start. And then we're going to concatenate this. And I like to use template strings whenever I do string concatenation because it never felt right to me to add strings together. That always felt like nonsense. So here is our template strings, and we're going to specify what is the new text, and that's actually called text in this case because we got the text off of the event that we're getting. So this is the something the user is typing. And now we want to do this slice again, but we're basically slicing now the remainder of the string after the range.end. So I think this is a way to construct our new text. Let's find out how this actually looks like in our code. And I'm going to reload because I'm nervous about things not looking right. Okay, so I'm going to type A. Now let's see what happens. Okay, interesting. So the slicing has not entirely worked. So we did a start and an end. So everything looks good until we got to this section of our concatenation. So what happens if you do from 0? Oh, it's because this is my bug. I'm just going to delete that 0. Because we just need to slice from the end to the rest of the string, so you can provide a single argument and to slice. Oh boy, we're really doing coding today, aren't we? This is terrifying. What have I gotten myself into? I really bit off a big project for a live stream. Okay, so now we're going to try it again. I'm going to type A, and it looks good. Now, finally, this is kind of refreshing that the value really resembles what it's like. So now if I hit remount, nothing bad happens. Oh my gosh, that's so refreshing that because this remount button is usually surfacing terrible, terrible bugs. Okay, now we're going to try a different one. We're going to go to the let's go to the beginning of the string and type A. And it looks good as well. If I hit remount, nothing bad happens. Okay, now let's make sure that the bold behavior continues to work. Okay, now I can type something else like foo. Now I'm going to go to the middle of the string and say, oh. Wow, this is nice. A hello, world, foo. Okay, autocomplete. Also looks like it's working. Like if I press remount, I pressed remount and this text did not jump around. Jump around, jump, jump, jump around. Get up, and get down. Okay, so our single node rich text editor is working. Okay, so now we can move on from some of this stuff. I am going to delete this log statement because it's just annoying me. And we can move on to some more of the interesting parts. But now at least we have a text editor where we're able to bold and unbold the entire thing and keep our input up to date with what our output is. It's like so much work has gone into something so mundane and so simple. Like we're already at like 220 lines of code almost. But don't worry, it's going to get worse. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. So now let's go ahead and make it so that we can create 2 nodes out of nothing. Or I'll tell you what, I want to fix something really quickly because this is going to be an easy fix and it will be really nice to be able to start with an empty state. Because right now, let me come and show you. If I type here, it says, oh, empty value is not supported yet. It's like, what do you mean empty value is not supported yet? I'm literally just trying to type 1 character into the damn input. But this is a very easy fix, especially now that we can generate a key. So up here in our input event, this is the issue that we just saw. So if there's no items in the array, then we can basically just have an early return. It's a very simple situation. Oh yeah, we're going to return, but we also, the main thing we're doing here is we're calling an onValue callback. So we're going to basically say that we're going to create onValue, it's an array, and we're just going to hard code this initial element. No biggie to do this as a special case. So text, so t is literally going to equal text, and then we need to specify a key. That's a, what was it, get node key. Okay, so now I'm going to refresh and type t. Great. Okay, now if I hit remount, it should match. Oh, that's very refreshing. That's very refreshing that we fixed a thing with minimal hassle. Okay, so what else is going to be broken? Let's see what happens now. Oops, okay, I keep on using the wrong keyboard shortcuts. Okay, so, no, I did mean bold. Can you, let's see, can I double select and then replace bold. Now what happens? I'm going to check if this looks correct from our value perspective. It does look good. Okay, so now I'm going to double click bold and tap bold, and it says, uh-oh, we had some trouble. And the reason why is because we need to do the splitting at this point. We need to basically say, oh, there were two different text nodes, and we need to identify the first one. Or we need to make it so this one text node is actually two text nodes. I misspoke there. So prepare the new value to have appropriate slicing. To do. This is relevant stuff. It's very relevant. So how do we need to like identify if the new value even needs this work at all? So there's going to be some like special case where we will say, hey, you've selected a not whole node. So that's what I mean by like this consideration node logic will be integrated, because this is where we have identified, look, you do have a whole node. So, and in fact, this allows you to select one node, but only one node. In theory, we should allow you to select a range of different nodes, and we're going to toggle the bold on several of them. That's why keys of toggle node is an array. So I think what we should try to do is we should try to make it so that this consideration process handles both things. So consideration node index, this is like what is the start range that we are considering. Okay, and then there's the consideration node. So basically we are going to have some sort of for statement here, some for loop, where we're going to be iterating over this logic again and again and again until we've gotten all of the nodes, or until we've produced the appropriate nodes. That's so confusing. This is exactly the code I was like dreading to write, and it's like, you know what will make it a lot easier is if I go live on Twitch. Maybe if there were people watching me write this code, this code that I'm terrified of, maybe that'll make everything easier. And it doesn't. So I need to identify which is the first node that the selection is in, right? Because here, I'll tell you what we can do is we can even make it so that, like, I think in this case, actually, I do want to do an extreme case. An extreme case. So what does an extreme case look like? We are selecting a word that needs to be broken up into 3 different nodes, because currently this is all just one text node, and we can verify that here. You can see this is a single thing. But now when we press bold, we want to split this up into 3. Not bold, bold, and then bold, and then, yeah, not bold, bold, and then not bold nodes. So right now, bad things happen. Very bad things happen. I don't even know why I pressed that button. So we need to identify which node the selection is inside of. So let's create a new variable for that called let selection start node. And that will be, geez, I don't know. That'll be basically, because it's let, I'm doing, like, we're going to start at 0, and we'll maybe figure it out. Because positions, we're not even using positions for anything. Okay, I'm going to delete positions. It was just there so that we can kind of wrap our mind around things. But it's not that expensive, I think, to just go through the actual value. So selection start node is 0, but maybe it's a dot find. Let's just do a for loop or a while. Okay, while loops are really scary, by the way, because you can easily like get yourself stuck where like your JavaScript is just spinning indefinitely inside of the while loop. So I just need to be as careful as possible. So while the selection start node empty value is not supported yet. Okay, so we know that there will be at least one node. So while the selection start node is not equal, or while it equals null. So our first step is to figure out like which is the very first node that can apply. So while the selection start node is equal to null, we're going to iterate over and be incrementing some other value, which is like let consideration node start test index. So basically we're going to say that, hey, maybe the first, like we're going to be saying, we're going to check the selection.start, because we have selection.start and selection.end. And we can also say if not select, because we want to make sure that there is a selection here. Okay, so we're going to be, okay, so there's the selection start test index. There's the index as in which node you're looking at, and there's also the index as in which character you're looking at. So I'm going to start using index to refer to the node and char, like Charizard, to refer to the character that's being considered. Because, yeah, in the metadata for the value, it doesn't specify really any numbers. It's just all the numbers are inferred based on the length of each string. This is terrible code to write. This is not fun. But we'll do a test. We'll make it work. So if the selection.start is equal to the selection start test character, and then we also have let selection start node index is 0. And then what we'll do is we'll say at the end of every while loop, basically when we start considering the next node to see if the selection is inside of this node, we'll say selection start text car is plus equals to, because we're going to be incrementing it, kind of walking forward, trying to identify the correct node that we've actually selected. It plus equals 1, and the selection, oh no, that's what we do with the node index. And then what we do with the test char is we plus equals the length of the current node. So const test node. The test node is the node identified by the selection start node index. And it's inside of the new value, basically. Test node.t.length. So this is where we kind of are going to be, I think, finding the correct node that is either the node that will be made bold, or this is the node that we will need to split up into other nodes, and one of those other nodes will be made bold. So we've really gotten ourselves into algorithm zone, haven't we? Like this is, you know, people probably came here to see me write some React Native code, and like I'm like deep just writing like this crazy JavaScript stuff in order to interpret what's going on in the React Native ecosystem, in order so that way we can kind of make it so that this rich text editing experience might maybe work a little bit. Just a little bit of working would be nice. But I can't like test anything yet because we still have this while statement to sort out. And selection start node is never going to get assigned. So let's just say that, hey, if if the if, then the selection start node will equal the test node. And selection start node index. Oh, no, it does. It's already an index because I've hinted here that it's either a number or it's null. So we will say the selection start node index. Oh, it's really the selection start text. Is it text char or no, it's test char. And selection start test index. Getting these variable names is so useful. I mean, not just because there's maybe people watching me trying to understand what the hell is going on, but also for my own brain. Like, this is always worth finding better variable names that make sense to you, because these are the things that we're using to test to find the selection start node. So confusing, so confusing. But it's the test index. This is the case where the test actually pays off, and we are assigning the selection start node. So if the selection start is equal to the selection start test character, it's actually going to be testing to see if the selection is within this node. So if the selection.start is greater than or equal to, sorry, that's less than. If the selection starter is greater than or equal to, yeah, because we're only testing basically the selection.start at this time. This is so freaking deep, man. This is so deep. Selection start dot test character. Yes. And yeah, I think maybe this is all we need to do for now. And then what we have is we will have the selection start node. Okay, let's just do this as a sanity check. Because now at least the code should run. It's nice when the code runs. Okay, I tap bold. Yep, that's the same error that we had before. So we're literally just looking, yes, selection start node is 0. And we should actually test to see if this is working. So what I will do to test to see if this is working is I'll put in some more advanced starter state. Hello world, and then maybe there's like, we'll say good morning. So we're going to select basically hello wonderful world. We're going to select the word wonderful, and the selection start, oh, by the way, I need this to be a separate key. We'll just do this. Okay, we're going to make sure that the selection start index selection start node. We want to make sure that this is the correct node. My goodness, what a confusing situation. Okay, we're going to refresh. Okay, I tap wonderful, and then I tap bold. And it did not work because selection start node is still 0. Uh-oh. Whoopsie doopsies. I'm just going to repeat that process because I want a sanity check. Empty selection is not supported yet. That's interesting because it's not an empty selection. Okay, I don't know what that was about. So we have a bug here in this code that we just wrote that we thought would be so easy to understand. If you are here following along, props to you because this is like deep in it. I do not expect people to really succeed with this stuff. And by the way, I'm only going to be going for another half hour or so because I got to get on with my day. But this has been really interesting for me to get back into this mindset of using text input in this way with actual controlled children. Really interesting stuff. Really interesting stuff. But we're going to check to see if the selection start is greater. Okay, so yes, the selection start is greater than the selection start test char, but we also need to see if we're inside of the correct node. So that means we need to be comparing the selection.end as well. And that's what I had thought earlier, but I didn't think so. I had changed my mind about that, and I was wrong to change my mind. So if the selection.start is less than the, it's got to be less than the selection start test char plus the length of this node. And I will say, I'm not sure if it's less than or less than equal to. But I might just do that with a little bit of trial and error while I'm troubleshooting this. Okay, double tap this, tap bold, empty selection not supported yet. What gives? It's not an empty selection. What gives? Okay, tap U, hit bold. Okay. Okay, now the selection start node is 1. Nice. Very nice. What's not nice is we've surfaced a different bug. We have. And I'm not sure if you're spotting it yet, but here, this is the value that our app thinks we have. It thinks it says GMR, and then there's a separate node that says hello wonderful world. But we put in this R over there. So it basically has gone and edited the wrong node when we typed. And I think that might have been a bug that we knew about, actually, because node to edit is just hard-coded at 0, and we have not identified which node to edit. And this is one of those pretty embarrassing bugs, and this will be straightforward to fix. But this is the sort of pain, right? If for anyone who's like worked with children and text inputs in React Native, like tried to do rich text of any sort in React Native, this is the pain that you've probably experienced. And I would love for this to be a library that means that people will have less pain in the future. Maybe there is something out there. I've kind of looked, but maybe I should look for a different lower level of abstraction. But I'd prefer to have fewer features in this thing, but so that the bugs don't exist. Like these really terrifying bugs where the user has a different understanding of their state than it actually is. Because right now it says, wonderful world. Hello, wonderful world. But if I remount, which is effectively like the user going away and then reloading this screen, it jumps to GMR hello wonderful world. So I know this could be super difficult for people to follow, but that's representative of what it's like in the real world of React Native. So let's go ahead and just focus on fixing that one issue. Because it's a terrible world right now. Look, so hello wonderful world, and I say terrible. Now if I hit remount, hello terrible wonderful world. No, this is not good. Pressing remount should not change the actual text that's visible here. And this is something we can fix. I will copy some code from this area where this is part of the bold logic where we're determining what node needs to get bolded. And now this is determining what node needs to get edited. So we're not going to be using the selection start. We're going to be using the range.start as reported by the onTextInput event. So here where we're referring to selection.start, range.start, and range.end. But I think the rest of this logic should probably be good. So selection start node, or maybe instead of selection start node, let's change this to editing start node. And in fact, this is not really even the editing start node, this is just the editing node. Okay, so even though I've copied and pasted this logic, I am renaming things so that I can keep them straight in my brain. And this is the test node that's only being used inside of the while loop. And we're just trying to determine which is the node to edit. So that's the equivalent of the editing node. So I will remove the reference to node to edit, and I will put in editing node. And this is going to cause other issues because, but it's forward progress. We're just going to need to change some of this stuff because the ranges are going to be highly impacted, because the range that's being referred to here does not refer to the range inside of the node, it refers to the range in the overall string. And that's why I think editing test char might be relevant. But it's also like this is used previously. So let's just see what happens now. If we're just even able, if I reload, I'm going to change wonderful to terrible. And before I even tap remount, I could tap remount right now. I just want to look to see what it says here. Okay, so the index are like pushed off by about 1, 2, 3, 4 characters. That's why it says terrible 4 characters late. So this is exactly why I wanted to understand this. So what we'll do is at this time when we're looping through all of the nodes, determining which node we want to edit, we'll have a new variable, which is let char editing char offset. Let's just call it char offset for now. By default, it's 0 naturally. And oh, really? It's the same basically as the editing test char. Okay, maybe I'll just say editing char offset. Well, okay, because the editing test char is already here, I will just try using it. So this is basically when we're taking the previous string and we're putting it into the new string. So anytime where we refer to range.start, I think we need to subtract the editing test char. And also here with a range.end, because this is the offset of the previous nodes. Let's just try this. It might result in terrible things happening, but we could be surprised. You know, there's always room to be surprised. I'll do a full refresh just for sanity's sake. And I'll come in here and type terrible. Oh, isn't that nice? Good morning. Hello, terrible world. So now, if I tap remount, nothing should change except it blurs because the previous text element or text input component went away. The new text input component is here now, so it blurs just naturally because it got unmounted. Whoa, that's so nice that we can actually edit now with multiple nodes. And the text changing code is aware of which node needs to be edited. I'm not sure I would have had the focus, by the way, to do this if I was not live streaming. So it's really helpful for me to live stream, actually, even if no one watches it. But I thank you to the 2 viewers who are here. Feel free to say something in chat. But like really, even if you weren't here, I'm getting value out of this because I'm going to share it eventually. I want this to be useful for other people, and that allows me to summon levels of focus that are not otherwise available to me to write this really freaking mundane and confusing code. So thank you for being an audience and helping me focus. Prepare the new value to have appropriate slicing. So basically, we were still in the middle of this project when we got kind of busted up by the other stuff. And now I think we might be able to come back and to start introducing these additional slices. So one thing we could do potentially is we could make it so that the slices always get introduced, and that maybe sometimes there's like empty nodes, and empty nodes will just get stripped from the value at the end of it. Because if you're doing some deletion, then maybe the empty nodes should get cleaned away. Interesting concept, right? So for example, what happens if I delete a whole node here? I'm going to try deleting a whole node. Okay. Oh, maybe I just don't want to delete nodes anymore. Like if I edit this node, it works fine, right? The new value is dot space and then hello wonderful world. Okay, maybe I will try and fix this. Delete, and now it says we've had a trouble. There is no test node.t. It's not an object. Does that mean the whole test node has gone away? It's at the time we're doing a plus equals. So maybe what we can do is we can say, because this is still during the editing time. This error is not exactly what I was expecting. I thought that it would be able to create the empty string when we do a deletion. Well, and by the way, the event that is happening is start 0, end 1, and the text is an empty string. So that's what it looks like from the event side of things when you press delete. Ooh boy. Ooh boy. Editing test index. So test node.t. Let's just say that if you have a test node, but why would the test node not be here is the only thing I don't understand. I wonder if we can get this to show up as a breakpoint. Because potentially we can come into here and come into our sources or our, like the debugger sort of environment. And I just want to press this button that says stop when the bad things happen. It's like, please just catch the disasters in the act. Okay, delete, delete. No, we didn't catch it in the act. Pause on caught exceptions, maybe? I'm trying to remember how to use the debugger, which is like noob stuff. Okay, that was good. So now we can see the values of everything. I know it's super small and probably hard to read this. I'm just trying to zoom in, but maybe I can do it like this. Okay. So if the pixels are going through, then maybe you can see what's going on. But the editing test index has moved on to 3. I see. So basically, we've determined that the end is 0, the start is 0, the current new value is, oh, I see. This is exactly what we said earlier where it's like maybe this needs to be a minus then or equals to. Because I think that's what's happening here is that we've matched the exact size of the node. And maybe we'll get to the state now that I hoped we would get to. I'm just going to refresh. And we want to get to the state where we have an empty node. Okay, no errors. Now let's see what the value looks like. Oh, the logs have been moved over here. So the value, the value says there's still a space, which is a little bit confusing. Yeah, it's like as if it's not able to remove that last bit. Yeah, well, we're in for a world of hurt. I will eventually load this back up into my brain at some point because I think this is the best way to do text editing in React Native. It's literally either this or use a whole web view and a whole suite of technologies inside of the web view, like a rich text editing experience that's built upon content editable. And all of that stuff is super painful. So at this point, like, I think we've made really good progress. Like, hey, look, we can come here. I'm going to simplify our example a little bit so that way, so the demo works. Don't mind me. Bold text editor. It's all or nothing, baby. Okay. So hey, and here I'm going to delete some of the stuff that is the most embarrassing parts of the progress that we've made. I'm going to I'm going to hide this remount button. And we don't need to have this other text input here at all. So I can clean that stuff up. And now we can make it so that the demo looks really impressive, where it's like, look, we can edit the text, right? Look, text is editable. And it's a controlled component, basically, not actually, but kind of, in theory. I'm going to stop Chrome debugging as well. Disable remote debugger. Okay, so this is what I mean by it's all or nothing, baby. You can select all of the text. You can make it bold. No, you can't. No, you can't. Well, in any case, I think we have made good progress, despite the flagrant regressions. Didn't we have some log statements in here? Doing bolding or unbolding. I'm going to remove some of these confusing log statements, but this is what it's like in the real world. This is like a real world day, a real world example of React Native progress / suffering. And you can see that there's a bug being demonstrated where it still says it's all or nothing, baby. It's getting a little bit confused. But hey, maybe I can select all and press bold, or maybe I can't. You know, welcome to the real world where progress happens in fits and starts. We created this new text input component. We got a few features working, but it's a really complicated environment to work in. It's actually, I think, better than using raw text input or raw content editable on web, but it's a lot of suffering to do rich text in basically any platform. I think a lot of this logic that we would be doing, that we're doing here, would need to be replicated if we built this using native code on either platform. But here we are doing it in a cross-platform way. It's just a lot of work. It's just really kind of painful and interesting. And we need to do all of this logic to convert the actual presentation of the text to and the events that are happening against that presentation to our own internal representation. So this has been a lot of fun. This has been very interesting, but like I'm gonna wind it down at this point. So thanks for joining me up until this point. Like I think once I get this to be a little bit more mature, I'll probably work this into the Zurv codebase because it's super important for this content management system that I'm working on to have real human text. That's what I'm going to call it. It's human text editor because not only, like right now it's, you know, jokingly and lovingly referred to as a mediocre text editor, and it will be mediocre for a very long time. But there is a limit to what sort of features I want in here. I don't really want to do any layout or anything like that. This is just handling a single chunk of text. It can be multi-line, I think. I think it's important to support multi-line. I think it's important to support bold, obviously. We spent all day trying to make bold work. Got nowhere close to even making it work all the way, but you can at least see what's going on inside of my head. I think we need to have italic and underline and strike through, because all of those work in the same way. They're just like attributes that can be put onto different strings, and every string can have all of those or none of those. And lastly, and probably most importantly, is inline links. And maybe we can do mentions or something like that, but I think links are the one abstraction that are really necessary to have as part of real human text. Because when you're presenting text to humans, sometimes you need to refer to a link in line. And that's really common content editing capability. So even though this has been extremely painful today, I think it's not a waste of time to have worked on this. And I think that this human text editor will be incredibly valuable, not just for Zurv, but maybe for other projects as well. And at the very least, now you can see what it's like to use React Native itself, not a web view within React Native, but use React Native to try to implement rich text editing. We can't say there's been a success today, but we can say that an attempt has been made. So thanks so much for joining, probably watching the VOD, because I don't think there's anybody left in chat. I think everyone got scared off by this disgusting code and this technical mess that I've gotten myself into. And that's just fine. I'm happy to take today as a win in some way, but mostly as an L. And this is the beginning of a pretty big project, but a project that I think is worth my time. And at the very least, I can share my pain with you. So spread that suffering around. What is that? Misery loves company. So thanks for being in my company today, or as you're watching, maybe on YouTube. And I